Business is the land acknowledgement statement for the town of Smith Falls. On February 2nd, 2022, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been the site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. Next item of business is the approval of the agenda. We're going to move priority issue number 1 up ahead of the delegation. If everyone is in agreement with that, are there any other changes to be made to the agenda? Any additions, or would someone move that we approve the agenda as amended? Lorraine, and a seconder? Tony, thank you. Since it's a special meeting, there are no minutes to adopt. Disclosure of monetary interest, anyone? Okay, hearing none, we'll move ahead then with priority issue number 1, excuse me, which is the Confederation Bridge. We asked to have this special meeting once the notice of study commencement was published for everyone to know about. And we just thought an open discussion with the Municipal Heritage Committee might be a very useful thing to have at this point in time. Who would like to begin? Lorraine, would you like to start? Thank you.
Don't mind, I'll just read this. I meant to send it out to everybody, but ran out of time. So these are just my thoughts over the last 11 years that I've been a councillor on the bridge. One of the reasons I became a councillor was my love and interest in the bridge and saving it, and the heritage attributes that our town has was very important to me. So I just started by saying I used to, as a child, stand on the side of the bridge. When the falls started to get in the spring quite active, you could get sprayed, and that was one of our favorite things to do. The bridge has been closed for quite a while, so no one's been doing that. But if you'd like to see a really interesting article, Google Historic Bridges of Ontario. When you get there, click on Lanark. Our bridges are included, all of them. The Confederation Bridge is highlighted and described with pictures and detail. In 2010, the town of Smith Falls did a 10-year construction forecast where shared that the structural survey was done in 1986 from where rehabilitated through the partial replacement of some of the structural members, floor beams, bottom truss cord, and lateral braces. And it sat like that for a very long time. At that time, a new laminated wood deck took place. That was $130,000 we spent. Then it was proposed in the 2010 budget for the studies and railing repair required. That was never done. In 2012, we hired a group to look at decommissioning the bridge. They found it was not necessary for the volumes of traffic. In 2015, the town closed the bridge to vehicular traffic. In 2016, council was given a report that recommended deferring decisions on the bridge until after the RFP for the redevelopment of the old water treatment plant. Later that year, the MHC had a symposium called Bridging Hometown Pride with Heritage Assets. And Andrew Ross was our speaker. He was amazing. Andrew's firm were experts in building and restoring historic bridges. And at that time, Andrew thought, I went and visited him, and he also talked to us at the symposium, that it would take about $75,000 to restore the bridge. Council had an update report in 2009. It's 2009-092 is the report, recommending waiting until we knew what Bruce Linton would be doing with the water treatment plant. That never happened and was withdrawn. In 2020, in a report 2020-022, Troy Dunlop outlined the options for the bridge. This time it was going to cost $1,500,000 to refurbish the existing bridge. It is my hope MHC still wants to restore Confederation Bridge. Let us recommend getting a quote from Andrew Ross again. There is an RFP out, but let's have the information to help the proponent to be able to keep the historic bridge as part of their plan. Thank you.
Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce for our viewers, Paul McMahon, the Director of Public Works for the town of Smith Falls, and Lisa Marshall from McIntosh Perry, the consulting firm that's going to be carrying out the environmental assessment. Is that correct, Lisa? Okay, so who would like to speak next?
Yeah, so Lisa is more or less here to observe this evening and take some notes, kind of in a preliminary fashion as part of the Municipal Class EA and the commencement of the study. So I can speak a little bit about where we're currently at, and I'd like to thank Councillor Allen for that comprehensive overview, I guess, of the bridge and its history and how we got to this point in time today. That's a bit of a tough act to follow. So anyways, I guess the long and the short of it is, I mean, this the outcome for what we know Confederation Bridge municipally here in the town of Smith Falls has been noted in the strategic plan for the town of Smith Falls to determine for this council what options they have moving forward for the structure itself. Hence why we put out an RFP for Municipal Class EA to be performed. The Municipal Class EA is being done as a Schedule B currently. So all that to say, the Schedule B, you know, there's certain things that need to be completed as part of the Municipal Class EA, and one of them is public consultation with different parties, different stakeholders. One of them being obviously the municipal heritage, the folks that are here this evening. And where we're at right now is we've issued a notice of study commencement, and what that means is McIntosh Perry is starting to get the ball rolling in terms of some of their consultation with different stakeholders. There's an amount of field work that needs to be completed, i.e. some archaeological assessments, some survey work, some topographic survey work that needs to be completed to inform, you know, the design down the road, whether or not it's a rehabilitation or a replacement or what have you. So there is some field work that they've been working on this fall, and then unfortunately we were hit by that storm on the 17th of January, which kind of put a damper on the progression of those works. So right now, much of the field work is being deferred until either we get a spring, early spring thaw, or we simply get into spring conditions. So not much more to say at this point. I mean, we've issued that notice of study commencement on our website. It's currently up on Speak Up Smith Falls. My office, I've already received I'd say maybe 6 to 8 different emails from people within the community just expressing their interest in the bridge and what they feel should be done with the bridge, you know, whether it be, I've heard everything from removal to replacement with the 2-lane bridge with sidewalks on either side, to removal, a bit of a plethora of everything. So all that to say, I mean, we've certainly taken those comments, we've recorded them, we've got them, and we've indicated to those people that we'll reach out to them once we get to scheduling a public information center, which is part of the assignment for McIntosh Perry with this project. And as we know, I'm sure many of you have participated in public information centers. It's just that it's an opportunity for the public to engage in that discussion, to discuss the different quote unquote options, if you will. And options range from, you know, do nothing to rehabilitation of the bridge, cloning of the bridge, replacement of the bridge with something perhaps different from what we see there today, to removal. You know, there's always different options. And like I said, doing nothing is always an option. But I don't think that's in the best interest of the town. I think council, whether it be the current council or future councils, wouldn't want to see the bridge sit as it currently sits there right now with no decking on it, with Jersey barriers at the end and it closed. What we do know, and I understand that Julia Crowder is going to be speaking about the, what's to happen with 25 Old Mill Road here this evening as well. Much of what happens with the bridge, I think, will be informed from whatever the successful proponent for that RFP, what their vision is for the area. So I wouldn't say the bridge discussion is 100% hinged on what happens with 25 Old Mill Road, but it's certainly going to have some influence as to what happens with the bridge, primarily due to traffic circulation in and around that development. So we do know that the bridge is currently closed to pedestrian and vehicular traffic. We do know that historically traffic volumes in that area have been relatively light. It is within somewhat of a park setting over in that area. But I just wanted to make this committee aware that, obviously there haven't been any decisions made. I don't have, as Director of Public Works, a vision for this structure one way or the other. I think we're all cognizant of the fact that the Municipal Class EA will inform different options for council to consider when the time comes. This assignment is to be wrapped up by sometime in June. We have a little bit of leeway, and why the June deadline was important was to make sure that we're well poised to have this assignment kind of buttoned up so we can get in front of this current council before possibly we're into a lame duck situation in light of the fall. What's the word I'm looking for? Just had my brain just melted, the election this fall. So all that to say, I wasn't going to put Lisa on the spot. She was just here more or less to take notes, but I just wonder if Lisa, just high level, if there's anything I missed, Lisa, that perhaps you wanted to add.
No, we're just, like you said, in the preliminary stages of this study. We're looking for as much input as possible. We go in with a very clear-minded, we don't have a set perception of, is this going to be a replacement? So we're open-minded. We want to run all evaluation on all alternatives and look at it from a very sound perspective. So at this time, we're just gaining the information. I will go back one step with respect to the field visits. Heritage has been out on site, and they're currently formulating their response with respect to what they saw. As we all know, it is in a heritage area. It's very likely it will meet one of the heritage criteria. But like I said, I don't want to over speak on that at this time, just because I don't have the formal report or findings at that time. But we will assess it all as we go through our evaluations. And I very much value the input of the committee in moving forward and helping us, go through that evaluation.
Just one thing I wanted to add, that there will be as part of this assignment for this there will be a cultural heritage evaluation report completed and a heritage impact assessment, and so that will bring to light a lot of. I have had some correspondence with Tony on this committee, and much of what he's speaking about with respect to the heritage significance of this particular bridge will be informed through that, what we call the share, and an HIA, cultural heritage evaluation report, and a heritage impact assessment. So I just wanted to note that for this committee as well. So through the chair, Dorothy, that's pretty well all I have to speak on at this point. So happy to take any questions, and hopefully we can answer them at this stage of the game.
Tony, would you like to speak then to the heritage value of the bridge?
Sure, I sure can. I got some of what Lisa was saying about the heritage attributes of the bridge. Excuse me, before I get into that, one thing I did want to say, with the information that's going out to the town, I saw very little, in fact, I might say nothing, describing its heritage value. That it is designated by the Canadian government as a heritage structure. It is recognized internationally as a significant structure worldwide. And it's also it has at this time protection under the Municipal Heritage Act. I really think that should go out in the information package. Yeah, I wasn't really catching on like who is looking into the historical attributes of this bridge. I mean, it's clearly designed, it's designated nationally and internationally.
Tony, has the statement that we prepared did you send that to Paul? The statement of cultural heritage value or interest that you and I worked on?
I wrote him a letter which probably contains much of that information. Do you have that, Dorothy?
I have the statement, but it didn't, I sent it out to all the committee members and staff, but it didn't get included with the agenda. But maybe you wouldn't have seen it anyway, Paul. Go ahead.
Yeah, so through the chair, I just wanted to make the point, like I mentioned before, there is a cultural heritage evaluation report and a heritage impact assessment that is yet to be completed. So like Lisa and myself mentioned, we're somewhat at the infancy of this assignment in a municipal class EA. So there's a bunch of different things that need to unfold as we work through this process. So to Tony's point, I think all of what he's mentioning will be is definitely of interest for sure, 100%, and it will be informed through those two different reports that I'd mentioned before, which will be subsequently uploaded to the platform that we're using on Speak Up Smith Falls. And at that point in time, hopefully we're in a position where, we'll be having our public information center. Who knows whether or not that'll be in person or not, or if it'll be virtual, but regardless, there'll still be an opportunity for people to participate. And hopefully at that point in time, maybe perhaps those two reports, if nothing else, will be in a draft format, and much of the meat and potatoes, if you will be in those reports. So it's not to suggest that we're not respective or cognizant of the heritage aspects. It's just we haven't got to that point yet, if that makes sense.
And those reports would come to this committee then when they're ready?
They certainly can. They'll be uploaded, Dorothy, to the Speak Up Smith Falls site and our platforms that we're using. So they'll be there for your perusal to look at it. Yeah.
Tony?
Just one other quick thing, Paul. I do kind of have an issue when you're considering that a developer might have some kind of overall plan of what we should do in Smith Falls with our local heritage attributes. I think that's something we should be looking after, not developers who are coming in. Anyway, that's my comment on that one. I'm pretty protective about the bridge. Sorry about that.
No, through the chair, that's quite all right, Tony. I think not to put words in Julia's mouth, but I think that's maybe something she'll speak about later. And definitely, I think the town needs to be, to a certain degree, kind of driving the bus on this, and perhaps not take 100% of our cues from the developer, but nonetheless, I think the town has an interest in developing that site, and obviously we want to be comfortable with what the developer's interests are and what that site's going to look like in terms of access and egress and traffic volumes and pedestrian volumes, all of that. Obviously, we want to incorporate that into this assignment for the bridge to make sure that we're presenting presenting the information to council so they can make an informed decision. Yeah.
Okay, any more comments or questions? Chris?
Thanks, Dorothy, and thanks for coming tonight, Paul and Lisa. It's really great to hear that there's a heritage impact statement happening and a cultural heritage evaluation report going through. So I think we're going to really be able to, I would assume those are going to capture everything that everything that we're concerned about. I'm wondering, from the Keystone report that came out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is we did the Keystone report for this structural assessment to see what we could do with it. That report suggested we do this Class EA, and now this Class EA is a deep dive into what we're going to do with this river crossing. And I'm wondering, is there anything from that Keystone report that's still valid going into this Class EA, or is this Class EA going to reevaluate everything that was looked at in that report and give a more updated version?
Yeah, so if Lisa, if you're comfortable, maybe I'll defer to you on that. You've seen that that was information that we passed along to McIntosh Perry.
So at this time, I haven't done a deep dive into that report myself. Our structural team is looking at it, so I can't speak to the full in and out of it. But through this assignment and through the RFP when we were bidding, we were going based on those previous studies. We'll look at them. We are going to go out and take a look at the structure itself. Our structural team will, but it's not a detailed structural assessment that we're updating at this time as part of this study. If they flag something, it may be warranted, and we'll have those talks with Paul moving forward.
Paul?
Yeah, through the chair, to answer Chris's question and to elaborate a little bit more on Lisa's comment. Yeah, so that's certainly something, you know, as the assignment unfolds, I'm not so naive enough to think that maybe perhaps there might be more that come of it, that we need to look into something a little bit deeper. But right at this point in time, we don't know until we get out boots on the ground and get McIntosh Perry's structural team to look at it. And unfortunately, the weather hasn't been all that conducive, and there's quite a bit of water going down through the river at this point in time. Makes that a little bit challenging. So had we not got 16 inches of snow on the 17th, it might have changed things a little bit. But nonetheless, if we need to, you know, since the Keystone report and now, if we think there's value in doing a subsequent structural analysis, if there's suggestions along through the process that maybe perhaps the bridge, through consultation with this committee and other interest groups, if the consensus is kind of looking like it ought to be salvaged and rehabilitated, then obviously a structural analysis, very comprehensive structural analysis, would have to take place in order to inform what needs to be done to it at that time. So, and that of course will be brought in front of council for consideration if that's the route we want to go, because it would be a change order to the assignment.
So I'm wondering, when we go through the Class EA process, is there an opportunity for the MHC to review the draft recommendations and provide any input before the final reports presented to council?
That I can't answer that, Chris. I'm not 100% certain if that's within the scope of this committee, but we can certainly come back to you guys on that. You'll certainly note it for now. Lisa, I'm sure, is making note of that, and if that's something that's appropriate, we can certainly do so. Yeah.
I think the big question, at least on my mind tonight, is if the committee were to go forward with recommending that this structure be put on the properties of interest list or be designated, the real incentive for that would be to have that increased engagement through the consultation process going towards a replacement. So I don't see that giving us significantly more say or political sway, but at least it might give us a formal lever for that dialogue. So I'm just wondering if you think that's necessary, or if we can just have that dialogue informally, or what the best way forward would be.
Yeah, I through the chair, I think this this assignment and the interest in Bridge, obviously our local Municipal Heritage Committee is very much a valued stakeholder in this. So all that to say, it's not like we're going to have this meeting today and then this group isn't never going to talk about it with myself and or Lisa and her team. So we can certainly circle back to it. I'd be more than open to participate in subsequent meetings to inform as to kind of where things are at. But like I mentioned before, we're going to be very we're going to be very open with this assignment, obviously, as part of the municipal Class EA, and post everything to Speak Up Smith Falls, similarly to what we did with Beckwith Street phase 1, and just make sure that everything that's needs to be communicated is being communicated. So not only will this committee be able to see everything that's been done to date, but the rest of the community will be able to see the same. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, any further discussion then? Any more questions from committee members? Or comments?
Oh, I just wanted to add,
Oh, Jenny first, and then Tony.
I just wanted to add, the bridge is now on the properties of interest list.
Yes, it already is. That's correct. Yes.
So it's one step away from being designated as a being protected.
Jenny, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you, Dorothy. I'm not sure if Director McMunn can answer this. I know it's early and it's more of a hypothetical question. But if restoration is possible and that's the direction that's chosen, would there be some sort of plan for ongoing maintenance and care? I think the concern for me is that, you spend the money and you do the work and you have this beautifully restored structure, but if it's not taken care of afterwards, we're going to be in the same situation. It could again fall into disrepair. So I'm wondering if there would be some sort of maintenance plan.
Yeah, so through the chair, if I could. So every 2 years, municipalities are mandated to do what we call OSIM inspections, Ontario Structural something manual. I forget what the I stands for. So so we do put out a tender for those works to be completed every 2 years. They aren't necessarily like an in-depth structural analysis of the bridge. They're more so of a visual inspection, looking at the different elements of the bridge, looking at what the maintenance requirements are. It does provide a little bit of a path forward in terms of maintenance and what the municipality should be doing or shouldn't be doing. It could be anything from, the cleaning of the bearing seats underneath the structure itself, where they sit on the abutment walls, to descaling of paint and stuff and repainting, to the cleaning of expansion joints on the bridge. Those are the joints that we see up top when we drive over. So that kind of creates our framework of what we should be doing from a maintenance perspective to prolong the life of the bridge. Unfortunately, I've seen far too often, I'm sure Lisa can attest to this too, that bridges, you spend all this money, you put them in, and then maybe outside of the GTHA, where they have lots of resources, not to suggest that municipalities are delinquent, but it becomes a case of resources and money and time. However, we do have those OSIM inspections that are done every 2 years that does allow us to look at our operating and our capital budgets going forward to determine what we should be doing and at what point in time we should be doing to prolong the life of the bridge.
Thank you.
It's good engineering practice. And I'm certainly a proponent of making sure we're following that prescribed work as much as possible.
Chris?
Thanks, Dorothy. I had a question on, and this is pretty hypothetical, so I don't know if it's even answerable, but we know in 1986 that the bridge went through an extensive rehabilitation, and I think about half the members were replaced at that time. And based on the Keystone report, they were suggesting that an additional 50% of the members would have to be replaced. Now, I'm assuming the majority of the members that get replaced are on the deck and below the deck that get hit by the salt. But do we have a rough idea, if we went through another rehabilitation, what percentage of the bridge would actually be from 1906 and what percentage would be from 86 and what percentage would be from 2023?
Yeah, very hypothetical, Chris, through the chair. I wouldn't know. I'd be just pulling a number out of the hat. I'd be guessing at this point in time. So yeah.
Okay, just trying to weigh the clone option against the rehab option, and I think this is something that the Class A report, I guess, is going to give us better data on. So
Yeah, and through the chair, I think, you know, it's at the end of the day, it's a council decision as to what happens with this structure. Either it's, you know, if it's a replacement with something different, or a cloning of what's there with a new structure that looks very, you know, that's similar or same to what we currently have. Or if it's solely a pedestrian bridge, or maybe the existing bridge is solely converted into a pedestrian bridge, in which case it wouldn't take the loading of traffic other than pedestrian traffic. So there's a bunch of variables. But to answer your question, I don't know if even through this municipal class EA would be able to gauge whether or not, you know, how much of the bridge is existing from back at the from the turn of the century versus what was done in '86. And maybe perhaps that's over above my head. Maybe the structural engineers would be able to observe and document and have a better idea than I would. And Lisa, do you have anything to add to that? It's a tough one.
No, not at this time. We would have to do a visual inspection of it. Like, it would probably be a more detailed inspection that you'd have to look at it from a perspective to see if you could tell based on aging, like you said, the salt on the structure. Hopefully you'd be able to see that the very old stuff would be more corroded or whatever versus the newer stuff, but it would still be somewhat of an assumption at that time. And I'm not a structural engineer by any means, but I'm sure they could see various components, as well as looking at old drawings, you know, what was done at that point in time. They probably identified what members needed to be replaced and stuff. So if there's historical drawings on it from that point in time, then we could, you know, you could assess what components were old versus new.
Tony, go ahead.
My guess would be if it's got a rivet, it's old, and if it's got a bolt, it's new. The bridge down in Western Ontario has been rehabilitated. It was done over in the 1980s, and it is used for pedestrian traffic and some light vehicle traffic, summer only, but it's mostly a pedestrian and bicycle track. And it's the only truss bridge in Ontario.
And it was designated as a heritage site in 1987, isn't that correct, Tony?
In 1987, yes.
1987, yeah.
Yeah, there's another one out in Calgary as part of the Canada Trail. But yeah, that's the only two in Ontario. Ours than that one.
Okay.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions or comments, I'd like to thank Paul and Lisa very much for attending our meeting. Last chance for comments, anybody? Paul, go ahead.
Not so much a comment, just a statement. I would encourage everybody that's on this call to participate in the PIC, the Public Information Center, when we get to that point in time. And like I'd mentioned, or if there's an opportunity, if we want to discuss this further prior to the PIC or following, I'd be more than happy to participate in future discussion.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think through the chair, if is it okay that we leave at this point in time, or?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much for coming and
Bye,
giving us
Lisa.
that information.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you. Talk
Take
to you
care.
soon.
Bye-bye. So we won't make Julia wait any longer. The next item is the delegation request for proposals for the redevelopment of 25 Old Mill Road. So you have the floor, Julia.
Thank you, Dorothy, and through you to the Municipal Heritage Committee. Staff wanted to give the committee an opportunity to review the draft RFP prior to going to council on February 14th to provide some insight or feedback or comments with respect to the heritage text that we put in the RFP related to the water treatment center. As Councillor Allen had alluded to tonight, there was a proponent. We know Mr. Linton was in negotiations with the town for a number of years to develop this site, and those negotiations fell through at the end of 2021, and council directed staff to review and update the RFP and reissue. So we're looking to do that at the end of February, beginning of March, and the whole process will take 2 or 3 months. And we're hoping to find a successful proponent who's qualified and can move the project forward. So within the document, I hope everyone had a chance to read it. Under the building details, we laid out some of the historical references to the building when it was built, some of the features regarding the stone office building and the brick building. And we also noted that the property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act and through the bylaw that we currently have in place. We know that the bylaw is fairly overarching and broad with respect to the heritage features of the building and the property itself. It doesn't really give any specific features, but within our official plan, it does note that we require a heritage impact assessment in order to identify what those features are. So similar to Confederation Bridge, that assessment will really inform some of the heritage features that we may wish to keep. I think it's important to note that the building has been sitting for a long time. There is structural damage with the building. And the RFP is really built to give the proponent or potential proponents some leeway in terms of design. We're letting them know through the RFP that it's a historic building and that we want to keep some features, but we're asking them to tell us what they think those should be and how they're going to incorporate some of those features based on what the assessment comes out with. So I'm happy to answer any questions or take any feedback.
Go ahead, Tony. Sorry about that.
To Julia, hi. Who's going to identify what is historical in the building, Julia?
So through the development process, and as our official plan sets out, an impact assessment, a historical impact assessment has to be completed. So it will be a consultant who's familiar with historical assessments that the developer will have to engage in order to provide us with that report.
Also, I'd like to, if that does go on, of course, the committee would like to see that. And of course, there's information on those buildings. There's actually the 2 buildings there that were quite early. There's a lot of information on them at Heritage House as well. So I think if I can speak for the committee, those 2 buildings would be our main source of concern, not the add-ons that were done later. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lorraine? You're on mute.
Oh, I am?
Oh,
I'm not
you
on
weren't.
mute. I'm maybe
Okay.
not turned up enough, sorry.
I couldn't hear you.
I think that what I remember about the designation, or at least the why it's on interest initially, was that it shows 3 unique stages of development, factory development, and they're very unique and very different. And I think when Bruce Linton was looking at it, I think we were all waiting to see how he would deal with that. And I think that's the whole point of this. For me, I hope that there's a lot of the heritage attributes of the buildings, all of them, that can be used and integrated. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they do come up with it. And I hope they do a good job. I have some concerns, though. My biggest one is around the Stone Arch Dam wall. Like I looked at the, Julia, just if I can for a minute, I looked at all the maps and the designated areas or zones, and I'm a little confused because one of them, it seems to me, one of them, parcel B, I think, has, it's the one that used to be, and you may not know this, but there used to be a Coke plant there, bottling plant. Before that, it was a mill, but that plant was there for many years. And it looks like the parcel that you've got enclosed there goes up to some houses that are there. So I'm wondering if the parcel would be in front of them.
So
you know where I'm talking about? It's the parking lot. Like that structure beside the parking lot is the stone wall that's designated. It's very important because that's where the original falls were in Smiths Falls.
So through you, Madam Chair. So the stone arch is actually property of Parks Canada, and it isn't included within the design elements or within the development envelope. So that really has to stay there. You're right, it is designated, it is a heritage feature, and it cannot be disrupted, so to speak. The other buildings that you're talking about, parcel B, there's actually two parcels or two pieces of land that is included in parcel B, and it is the old building that's across the street from that. So where you're talking about, where the stone arch is, that's actually in between two of the lots that make up parcel B.
Right. So then my next question in regards to that is, the water tower is part of this negotiation.
So within the RFP, the water tower property is an optional piece. The developers would have to identify that parcel is something that they're interested in, but until anything can be done with that, the town needs to decide what they would like to do with that parcel. So, and what a developer would like to do as part of the overall scope of the development, that could help inform the town as to what they would like to do with that parcel. We know from previous reports from Public Works that structure is precarious without water being in it. We also know that the structure is old, it's starting to fail, and we're looking at replacing it with a new one that's going to support the town for future growth. So there is still some assessment that needs to be done. The replacement of the water tower is estimated to 3 to 5 years. So there is some time to figure out what's going to happen with that parcel. But again, if a developer identifies that as being a piece they would like to consider as part of the development, then that's something we have to bring back to council as part of the proposal packages, and talk to council about their thoughts on that.
I guess one of my concerns in that regard is that that's a very important park. That's where we had movies under the stars. We had a lot of things, events happen there all the time. And I was finding it difficult to see how much of that chunk we're giving away.
Well, at this point, we haven't assessed how much of that could be used. We have to determine what's happening with the water tower structure first before we can do that. So if a proponent, as part of their development, says we would like to remove the water tower and develop that entire parcel around it, then that's something that council will have to consider. But I do get the historical and cultural reference to the town of Smith Falls. We know that our water tower is iconic piece. And the developer may decide that they would like to try and incorporate the water tower as part of the design, or maybe instead of keeping the structure itself, maybe there's a mural on the side of the building where a building would now replace that tower. So I think there's still ways that we can keep the water tower, even if we're not keeping the structure itself.
You mentioned the bylaw that was used to designate the old water treatment plant, and the fact that it was very broad and that it didn't really indicate the heritage attributes. But it's my understanding that that bylaw is currently under revision as part of a rewriting of the old bylaws that weren't specific. So perhaps when that is finished, you'll have, there will be a much better idea of what the heritage attributes are.
So that bylaw is 4350-77, and maybe Carl or Mary could speak to that a little more about the update to that bylaw, and if maybe the assessment itself through this RFP and the redevelopment will maybe help inform the update of that bylaw.
Carl?
Yeah, so as it stands right now, the designation bylaw was written under previous legislation, and we're obligated to consider the reasons for the designation when we're looking at an alteration. Ultimately, this all comes back to council, and then council based on the advice of the MHC that has a role in the process, would be the ones to make a decision on whether to approve an alteration. And there's any number of options that can go forward based on what's found, what's proposed, all of that. And certainly MHC would be involved in that based on that on that designation. But yes, at this point, it's the reasons for the designation. If there's an alteration that affects the reason for the designation, then that's something that that would be approved by council. And I would imagine that based on the way the bylaw is currently worded and the redevelopment proposals that we anticipate seeing, chances are that would classify as an alteration, which would ultimately be approved by council. They're the final authority based on the advice of MHC. So the bylaw rewrite project, as noted, we have engaged a consultant to look at any of, and Mary can correct me if that's all of the bylaws that are all of the designation bylaws in the town, or I recall that we left a few of them off.
That's right. So 15 designating bylaws. There's 3, I believe, that were provincially protected, so they were left off.
Is this one of them?
No, it is not.
Okay. So certainly if
This one is, yeah. Sorry.
So I didn't catch that. Was that directed to me?
Yes, this one is on the list of the 15.
This is on the
correct?
list to be rewritten. It was, yeah, sorry, it's included for the rewrite. It was not one of the ones that was provincially protected and left off the list.
Right.
So this would give us and the committee an opportunity to, and council, of course, council will have the final say, of course, on whether to adopt an amended bylaw, but they would have the opportunity to consider the attributes that are identified through this process and hopefully give us and future proponents some clarity and certainty in terms of the important features.
Further comments and questions? Chris?
Thanks, Dorothy. Thanks, Julia. I think this is a really great improvement on the first version from the heritage perspective. My biggest concern is that I really appreciate that a heritage impact statement is part of it, but I've got a major concern with the fact that if that's going to be submitted as part of the proposal, the design's also being submitted as part of the proposal. So as much as they can say that they're going to study the heritage of the property and the attributes of the property, they've already come up with their design by the time they put this proposal to us, and we've already evaluated the design when we award the proposals. So I'm wondering, would it be in the town's best interest to do that impact statement separately, have that information to inform the RFP and to help the bidders come up with their design, and then that just smooths out all of these issues we have, like the last time where something's proposed and then we have to push back, and it just creates that unnecessary friction.
So that's definitely an option that council could consider if they feel that the town would prefer to undertake their own assessment, and then that help guide what the development could look like in terms of the building and the attributes that are going to be saved. That's going to significantly push back the RFP timeline, which is going to have an impact on Confederation Bridge and have an impact on a number of other things that we're looking at doing. So the assessment that's supposed to be done, you're right, will be done after a proponent is selected and through development application process. But I think there's still the opportunity for council to have a weigh-in on that design at that time. So nothing's necessarily set in stone. And I'll defer back to Carl again, because he can give a little bit more information or insight on that process and how that might work.
Do we have any, I'm not an expert by any means in this. I don't know what the difference between a cultural heritage evaluation report and a heritage impact assessment is. And I'm wondering if we need both or one or the other, or if anybody's got any insight in that area.
Carl?
If you'll just give me a moment, Madam Chair, I am looking up our official plan and the policy wording that that guides us on this question. And while I'm doing that, I can advise certainly that this project would be similar to the OP policies would apply here, similar to any project on a designated property that's owned by the private sector. And if they were looking to undertake a redevelopment, they'd have to go through all of that process. In this case, ultimately, council does have more control since we own the land, the town owns the land, and council will have the opportunity to make that decision. And certainly it would be up to council how to sort of balance these items through the decision. If you'll just give me a moment, I'm just pulling through the policies right now. If we wanted to move on to if anyone else had a different question.
Lorraine?
Yeah, I just have one other one, Julia. In property values in parcel A, you're saying that effective January 2013, that the parcel A would have been 115,000. I'm just curious if, like, in 2013, our property values would have been very different than in 2022. So I'm just wondering if that's going to be higher based on the current land value.
It's hard to say until we get another appraisal. So this was the last appraisal that the town did of the property. And so that's why it was included. It was also included in the 2017 RFP. Again, we could go and have another appraisal completed, or we could do that after we find a proponent and as part of the negotiations for the purchase of the property. What's different in this RFP as well is we're opening up the opportunity to lease the land. So if a developer or lease the building, if a developer doesn't necessarily want to purchase the property but wants to do a long-term lease, that's something that we're looking at. So instead of spending the money and jumping the gun, we decided to wait for an appraisal to see if that's something that we need after proponents have been selected and through the evaluation process. The market is from COVID has been up and down, but this property is very unique. It's not like residential. So the impact to the cost overall, I wouldn't see it being much different from 2013 to now. The property itself has also deteriorated over the years since 2013, since the original appraisal was completed. But again, we want to kind of give the opportunity for the proponent to propose what they think the value is. And I think our focus for this is not necessarily generating revenue for the town. It's getting the best design and the best development for the town and for the area. So that's really what we're focusing on. But again, council has the option to direct staff to get an appraisal if they so choose.
Chris?
Thanks, Dorothy. My other comment is on the scaling and the rating of the proposals. So it's an equal 20% split 5 ways. None of those 5 ways involve the heritage recycling of buildings or keeping the heritage attributes or restoring heritage attributes. And there's I just don't know how this vision and concept summary to me would be a higher percentage, like maybe that warrants 30%, 40%, and just really spell out what recognition of heritage structure means. Does that mean restoring things to the standards and guidelines of heritage sites in Canada? Is it recognizing it's there and taking a picture of it and putting it up in the lobby once it's all torn down? I'd really like to see more meat in that area, but and I 100% agree with Lorraine's comments about the more buildings that they can recycle at the site, the better. If they've got a really good proposal or a justification of why something can come down, that's acceptable to a point, but keeping those buildings keeps the story of the property alive. It also keeps those buildings from ending up in a landfill. So And then the water tower is an important part of that property. So if there's a way to incorporate that and to get the developer at this site to give it a coat of paint and we get another, 20 years out of it, even if it's empty. Those are all things I'd like to see points given to, but I'm not quite sure how that fits into the current proposal.
Okay, that's noted, and maybe that's some feedback, coming from this committee. If there's any specific things that you're looking at, or what would be cues and value for that recognition of heritage structure. That was something that we discussed internally as well when we're starting to draft the RFP. Are there features within the building that can be taken out and placed, on the property, or can they be showcased within a new development? What's the feasibility of trying to keep the entire building or sections of a building if they are deteriorated? In some cases, the feasibility to remove those and rebuild is going to be much more cost effective than trying to save, a whole brick building or a whole stone building, where maybe we're just incorporating one side of a building or the facade of the building, or some of the features that the buildings currently have. So maybe it's the arches around the windows. And again, that historical assessment will really help identify what really is of heritage significance in terms of, the era, and in terms of other thing that's happening in Smith Falls and other structures that are built in Smith Falls, and trying to align and coordinate and represent what Smith Falls is historically and culturally. Does that answer your question? Dorothy, I think Carl has his hand up.
Oh, yes, sorry, Carl, you moved on the screen, Carl, and I thought you'd vanished. Go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I did locate a couple of guiding policies, and again, these are policies that would normally apply for any development in town, whether it's done by us beforehand, done by developers later on. But the first one is that council will require a heritage impact assessment conducted by a qualified professional whenever a development has the potential to affect the protected heritage property or cultural heritage resource. Council shall require that all cultural heritage resources to be demolished or significantly altered are documented through the assessment for archival purposed with the history, photographic record, and measured drawings prior to demolition or alteration, and that such documentation shall be the responsibility of the applicant in consultation with the Ministry of Tourism, Culture, and Sport. And then the plan goes on to state that in addition to a heritage impact assessment, the town may request a heritage conservation plan to address in detail the conservation treatments for the subject heritage property. The town may also request a heritage interpretation plan to promote a heritage property identified in a heritage impact assessment. And ultimately, those are all items that are at the discretion of council. And certainly the RFP as I word it, as I read it, attempts to strike that balance between recognizing the importance of identifying and protecting resources and the heritage attributes of the site while trying to be flexible. Ultimately, it would be an interesting balance, however it proceeds, but certainly there at council's discretion, there is some flexibility in the timing and in terms of when these happen, but ultimately the town's OP implements provincial policy statement requirements as well that do require that the documentation and identification and where possible the preservation of these of the heritage resources.
Chris, you had your hand up before. Did you want to comment or ask a question?
Yeah, just comment that to me, that really solves it. We need this impact statement before the development can proceed. I think having that information before a developer spends a lot of time and money on an RFP package is going to be helpful for them, helpful for us, and ultimately lead to a better result for the town. So I'm wondering what the best way for us to suggest that to council would be, or going forward, what how we can strongly encourage that, because right now it sounds like we're really pushing the line if we're even following our own policies as a town by getting designs before we know what we need to keep or what we can let go of.
So Julia or Carl, would you like to comment on that?
Well, it's really a procedural, you're the Municipal Heritage Committee. It's your prerogative to advise council on what you think the best course of action moving forward is. So you'd have to write a resolution in order to recommend to council that you would like to see a heritage impact assessment be completed by the town before the RFP goes out. But I just want to caution you, that's going to significantly push back the timelines. And I know that this is a priority item, strategic item for this council, and they were really hoping to get, a proponent secured before the new council comes in to play. So you can really have the opportunity to weigh in as this council, because you put so much time and hard work and effort into, the past 4 years and trying to get it off the ground.
Harry?
I just wanted to confirm that Julia was correct. If the committee would like to give direction to council, the appropriate way to do that would be in form of a motion.
So is that something we want to entertain now, or would we prefer to wait until our meeting at the end of the month?
So just in terms of timeline, Dorothy, this the draft RFP is going to council for review on February 14th. So in 2 weeks, council will have an opportunity to review the RFP and make any comments, feedback before it gets issued at the end of the month. There's going to be a 2-week period that's being scheduled for marketing and advertising to the development community before the RFP is actually issued.
Chris?
I'd be okay making a motion. The only thing is, without being able to prepare it before the meeting, I don't have all of the specifics for wording. So I'm just wondering, Carl, what's the name of the policy? Do we know the bylaw that it's designated under, and do we know the policy that, with the name of the policy that requires the heritage impact statement or assessment?
Go ahead, Carl.
Thank you. Just if you'll give me a, I saw I didn't lower my hand beforehand. My apologies. A Zoom faux pas. So the policy in the official plan is ER-3.21 and 3.23. Those are the policies of the official plan. The applicable bylaw that we're working with, if you'll just give me a moment, I'm looking that up as well. Doing this by screen is not always the most efficient way, unfortunately. Just have to give me a moment here.
Well, while we're waiting, Julia, could I ask a question about the West Mill? Do you mind?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I was thrilled to pieces to see it on here because it's sat empty and it's such a beautiful, beautiful building. So I guess my question is, I understand that the developer won't be able to change the outside because that's a protected designated property. But the inside, is my understanding, they could make it like into other things. They could create a different design for the inside of that building.
Yeah,
it's really empty.
It is very empty and it's been sitting there for a while. So with regards to the West Mill, because it is federal crown building. Any proponent would have to enter into a lease with Parks Canada, and they'd have to negotiate with Parks Canada with regards to the design inside. But yes, there's definitely opportunity where it could be renovated and be incorporated into the new development.
At some point in this, you made reference to walking across to downtown. Where would that be? Was that across the dam?
So there is the dam, there's Confederation Bridge, but then there's also the stairs that were put in at the corner of Chambers and Beckwith Street, right in front of the tap house.
I think that's an amazing way to do it. I mean, right now it's just sitting sad. There's stairs going nowhere.
Exactly. So we're, hoping that a developer will incorporate that into the design. That's definitely part of the pedestrian assessment that was done, I think 5 or 6 years ago now, that it identified that as a potential pathway linkage. And so that's why the stairs were put in. It's just, there is some works that have to be done in order to make that area stable and safe for pedestrian access.
See, you have help, Carl.
Okay, so, sorry, Madam Chair, yes, the property is designated by bylaw 4350-77. And also I just, and I think for reference for especially the original presentation, actually, I'm going to read some information that that Director McMunn sent out as well. The purpose of a cultural heritage evaluation report is to assist the municipality in determining whether property, collection of properties, or landscape feature has cultural heritage value. The heritage impact assessment evaluates the impact of a proposed development, building alteration, or site alteration on a built heritage resource or cultural heritage landscape, and recommends mitigative measures or alternative development approaches to conserve the heritage attributes of that resource. So I think so perhaps one. So we'll I think we can Julia and I can take this back and discuss how do we best implement that. But I think we may be a little bit limited on how far we can go on an assessment without a specific plan in mind. I think it's clear to me that what the committee wants to do is identify what the specific features that are important. What is it that we really want to protect and ultimately give developers certainty. But ultimately, without a development plan in mind, we can only go so far as well. So I think that's a balance certainly that we'll have to we'll have to work collaboratively, all of us, in determining that. Julia, if you wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. And again, I think if there can be some constraints that happen if we do an assessment. Prior to that, we know developers, they have vision, they want to meet guidelines of towns that they're developing in. They're usually open to suggestions. Identifying some very specific features at this time could limit the design and the creativity that could come back to us. So that's something just to be cognizant of with doing the assessment. And Carl or Paul, maybe you can speak to timelines in terms of doing such an assessment. How long do we anticipate or estimate something like this would take to do? Because I'm assuming that there's an element of public consultation involved as well, council reporting. So it may be, a 3 to 4 month process, I'm estimating.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm not sure, Carl, if you wanted me to attempt to speak to it.
Go for it, Paul.
Yeah, so my experience, I don't think it takes 3 or 4 months to do either a cultural heritage evaluation report or a heritage impact assessment. Most of the work involved is looking at historical records, drawings that perhaps the municipality has, or as suggested by Mr. Humphrey, that there's lots of information online should one want to go and scour the internet and see what's out there for properties of heritage interest and been previously designated in whatever capacity. So all that to say is I don't think it takes months and months and months. I think it can be done within a shorter period of time, maybe perhaps a month and a half, 4 to 6 weeks to do either of those 2 documents. But I guess it really depends on the afforded resources to put towards that exercise. So if it's something that's not at the top of the list for the consultant to look at, or the developer's consultant in this particular case, then it may not be given the attention it perhaps should. So, well, Carl, if you want to add anything to that, but my experience is it doesn't take 4 to 6 months. It can be done a lot quicker than that.
Yes, I think at this, I have limited experience on this as on this, I guess, sitting at this side of the table. Certainly, normally when it comes to a private sector private sector development advancing a plan with a study, I don't always know the ins and outs of how the study is conducted and how long it takes. We just focus on the deliverable. But yes, I think in this case, the important, I guess, the key thing that I'd be looking for direction from the committee on is what is it that's, I guess, the most important deliverable and information from that the committee would like to see at this point. Is it just an assessment of basically going into more detail on what the bylaw has right now with a bit more, and identify the specific attributes and features that we may want to protect, knowing that and give that as part of a package, say to a developer, in which case, if that's the case, perhaps this can be done through our bylaw rewrite, where we already have a consultant working on other properties, and perhaps that can be expedited for this one. Or I'm thinking out loud here and looking for, or does the committee want to proceed on in some other way? I think is this just a matter of identifying the key features that we want to protect and having those codified somehow?
Chris, you had your hand up there.
Yeah, thanks, Dorothy. I'm wondering, even with the bylaw rewrite, according to the policy, we're still going to need to get an EIS. So whether or not the EIS comes before, or the heritage impact statement, so whether that happens before the RFP or after the RFP, according to our official plan policy, it needs to happen. Is that correct?
The heritage, it has to happen before council can approve a specific development. So the official plan doesn't get into the details in terms of at what stage of say an RFP process, but before we can give approval to a development, and this could be much later on in the process when we have a site plan, but we would not be, for instance, be able to approve a site plan application without having all of this information in hand first. But certainly, and similar to an EIS or a traffic impact study or any other supporting studies that support a development application, ultimately the consultants are typically reviewing a detailed plan. They have numbers in terms of the number of units or the anticipated traffic or all of those. So I think the best we'd likely be able to provide at this point is baseline information, knowing that in the future it would be a specific concept plan. If we're looking at environmental impact, for instance, we need a development concept that's where we'd be looking at the impact on fish habitat and any of the other any of the other natural heritage features. So I think any developer wants to have as much baseline information as they can get to help them make those decisions and get a sense of what the municipalities is going to be looking for.
Tony,
Dorothy, committee, and Chris too, could we not just specify that we're looking to save the original Matthew Ryan buildings and go from there? The developer could work with that. I mean, they're the buildings that are of heritage value. Am I correct? I mean, the original stone building and his addition after the, when the town bought it as a water treatment plant. So there's a stone structure and the brick structure next to it, and they're probably the best structures that are left there. The rest of them are, I know the one that was built in the 1950s, I think the roof is collapsed. But those two structures, are they not what we're looking to somehow save or maybe incorporate in whatever new structure goes in?
yes. Julia?
And those are the elements that were referenced in the RFP and would be something that we'd be looking at as part of the evaluation team to see if they are incorporated and how much of those structures are incorporated. So, through the development process and through the RFP process and the evaluation process, there's also a scheduled development meeting. I apologize. A development meeting and a site meeting, actually an on-site meeting for developers to come down and see the building where we can talk about some of these things. So the intention is to highlight those are some of the heritage features that we would like to see saved as part of the development.
Chris?
Looking at the schedule of it, we've got selection of proponent May 27th. It sounds like it's reasonable to expect an EIS to take 4 to 8 weeks, maybe 6 weeks seems like the number. So even if that goes from May 27th to June 27th or mid-July, we're talking about a very small amount of time in the development of a place that can completely change the look of our waterfront and our downtown and revitalize an underused space. So I really feel strongly that we should get this impact statement done before. I think it's going to, and we know because we've done this RFP process once before, and the biggest sticking point through it was a lack of clear expectations on what needed to be reused and what didn't, and how that was going to be evaluated. At the same time, since the last RFP went out, I don't believe that we only get one chance to get it right. So 4 to 6 weeks in the grand scheme of things, I think is good. Carl, I didn't get the bylaw number when you said it. So if I could get that again, I'd be happy to do a motion.
Okay.
I have it, Carl. It's 4350-77.
Right.
4350-77. Is there any other, any discussion or?
So are you prepared to make a motion then, Chris?
I'm going to try.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. Whereas 25 Old Mill, street or road? Road is designated under the Ontario Heritage Act through Smith Falls Bylaw 4350-77. And whereas the Town of Smith Falls official plan, part 4.24, alteration, removal, or demolition of heritage buildings, section ER-3.18 says to ensure a greater degree of protection to heritage resource properties, council may enter into agreements with property owners or may attempt to secure conservation easements in order to protect those features of a building or structure deemed to have particular heritage value. And where ER-3.20 says council will prevent the demolition, destruction, or inappropriate alteration of cultural heritage resources. Furthermore, council will conserve significant cultural heritage resources when undertaking public works. In attaining its goal for establishing a barrier-free environment to town-owned property, the town shall endeavor to provide access solutions in a manner that respects the cultural heritage value or interest of a protected property. Council recognizes that standardized designs may not always suffice and that each heritage property will require unique accessibility plans to ensure that alterations do not adversely affect the heritage attributes. And ER-3.21, Council will require a heritage impact assessment conducted by a qualified professional whenever a development has the potential to affect a protected heritage property or cultural heritage resource. Council shall require that all cultural heritage resources to be demolished or significantly altered are documented through the assessment for archival purpose with a history, photographic record, and measured drawings prior to the demolition or alteration, and that such documentation shall be the responsibility of the applicant in consultation with the Ministry of Tourism, Culture, and Sport. And section 3.22, a heritage impact assessment may be required where a development application may obstruct or detract from a view included as a cultural heritage value or attribute of a property of the Heritage Register to the satisfaction of the town. And whereas it's the opinion of the Town of Smith Falls Municipal Heritage Committee that this RFP process and subsequent development is likely to have an impact on the heritage of the property, that the heritage and that a higher quality RFP process will happen if the heritage impact assessment is completed before the RFP package is released. Therefore, be it resolved that the Municipal Heritage Committee of the Town of Smith Falls recommends that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls completes a heritage impact assessment for the release of the request for proposals for the redevelopment of 25 Old Mill Road. Is that enough words for?
Well done, Chris.
Yes, very good. Would somebody second that motion then, please?
I'd be happy to.
Tony seconds. Any further discussion before we vote on the motion? No, I guess. Okay, well, let's vote then. All in favor of the motion as presented?
My hand is, oh yes, my battery was low, sorry, my hand is up.
Against? Anybody against the motion? Oh, the motion is passed then. And how will this motion be presented to council?
I'm guessing by a Mary.
Yep.
Or Carl? Carl?
We will we'll converse amongst ourselves whether this would be an addendum to Julia's report or something separate brought forward by planning staff. But one way or the other, council will be made aware of the MHC's recommendation here.
Thank you very much. We do have one more item on the agenda, and we're almost at 6 o'clock. So if we could just briefly discuss Heritage Week, February 21st to 27th, and the social media posts that have been, I don't know who prepared them, but they were certainly included with our agenda. Lorraine?
It was delightful to read them, and the pictures, wherever the pictures came from, bravo, well done. I think it's a great way to celebrate Heritage Week.
I agree.
Can you tell us who did them?
Mary did
You
them.
did them, Mary?
Was it Mary? I thought it would have been.
Good for
Mary.
you.
Yeah, very, very good.
Yeah. Tony?
I did a little blurb on Heritage Week yesterday with Kathy Botham. I made sure to say I was speaking of my views and not the Heritage Committee's. And anyway, I promoted Heritage Week, and there would be social media posts coming out.
Good.
Great. Any further comments on that, or is it all ready to go, Mary?
So I just gave it to Lisa Bell at the Heritage House just to have a brief look, make sure that everything was factual. And as long as she endorses it, then it'll be sent to our communications coordinator so she can schedule her Facebook posts.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Oh, can I ask just a quick one?
Yeah, sure.
Can we if it's going on the town's Facebook post, can we bring that over onto the railway museums as well? Because we got about 57,000 people who watch our Facebook post.
I'm happy to share the information with you, Tony, once Lisa finalizes it.
Okay, great, good stuff.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. We don't have roundtables since it's a special meeting. So the next meeting, regular meeting of the Municipal Heritage Committee will be on February 23rd, starting at 4:30 p.m. So would someone move that we adjourn this meeting?
I will do that too.
And Katie. Katie's going to do it.
I guess Katie's hungry.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your
Thank
time
you.
for attending this special meeting.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
You too, Dorothy.